I'm Mila, 35 female. I live in a quiet little apartment above a bookstore in a town that feels like it's perpetually autumn. As a librarian, I've built my life around order, quiet, and the gentle logic of the Dewey Decimal System. My world is one of carefully curated shelves and predictable routines. That world was about to be buried under the chaos of my parents' past, a mess my siblings decided was my problem alone. This is the story of how I was abandoned to deal with the physical and emotional wreckage of my family home, and how, in the middle of all that junk, I found a secret that would redefine my future and teach my siblings a lesson about the true meaning of value. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday, the quietest day at the library. It was my brother, Leo, his voice crisp and devoid of any real warmth, a tone I'd come to associate with business transactions. Mila, we need to have a family meeting about the house. Zoom call Thursday at 7. Don't be late. He didn't ask if I was free. He informed me of a decision that had already been made. That was Leo's way. As a financial advisor, he saw life as a series of assets and liabilities, and our late parents' house had just been moved firmly into the liability column. Our parents had passed away within 6 months of each other the previous year. Mom's heart gave out first, and Dad, lost without her after 50 years of marriage, simply faded away. Their final years had been marked by a slow, creeping isolation. They stopped inviting people over, and when we visited, we were kept in the living room, a carefully maintained island in a sea of encroaching clutter. We knew they were collectors, as Mom gently put it. We just didn't know the scale of it. After the funerals, the three of us, Leo, our sister Sophia, and me, had collectively decided to postpone dealing with the house. The grief was too raw, the task too monumental. But a year of property taxes and nagging guilt had finally brought Leo to a breaking point. On Thursday, I logged into the Zoom call from my small, tidy apartment. My screen was a neat grid of books. Sophia's background was a perfectly curated living room with beige furniture and a single, dramatic orchid. Leo's was a blurred-out office, suggesting he was too important to be disturbed. He got straight to the point. "The house has to be sold," he announced, as if issuing a quarterly report. "The market is peaking, and we're losing money every day it just sits there. I've spoken to a realtor. He said we could list it for a decent price, but only if it's completely cleared out. And I mean completely." Sophia, an event planner whose life revolved around aesthetics and appearances, shuddered theatrically. The smell. The last time I was there, I had to double-bag my shoes before putting them back in the car. It's going to take an army to clear that place. Can't we just hire one of those hoarding cleanup services? Leo had already looked into it. I got a few quotes. They're astronomical. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars. They charge a premium for biohazards, and given the state of the kitchen and the number of old newspapers, well, it qualifies. He sighed, adjusting his glasses. That cost would eat up a significant portion of the inheritance. It doesn't make financial sense. I listened silently, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. I knew where this was going. I was the youngest, the unmarried one with no children. In their eyes, my time was less valuable. My life was simpler, more flexible. I was the default solution to inconvenient family problems. "What are you suggesting, Leo?" I asked, keeping my voice even. He didn't miss a beat. "You have the most free time, Mila. You work at a library. You get weekends off, holidays. Sophia is running her business, and I'm swamped with clients, especially at the end of the quarter. It makes the most logical sense for you to take the lead on this." "Take the lead," I repeated, the phrase tasting like poison. What does take the lead mean? Sophia jumped in, her voice syrupy with false sympathy. "It means you'd be our project manager. You're so organized, Mila. You could sort through everything, decide what to keep, what to donate, what to toss. We trust your judgment." She smiled, as if bestowing a great honor upon me. "We can't be there physically, but we'll be there in spirit. We can have a group chat to cheer you on." The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. They weren't asking for my help, they were assigning me a job. A disgusting, emotionally draining, physically demanding job that they had no intention of participating in. So you want me to single-handedly clean out a 3-bedroom hoarder house while you two do nothing? I asked, the politeness finally cracking in my voice. It's not nothing, Leo countered defensively. I'm managing the financial side of the estate, dealing with the lawyers, the realtor. That's a huge time commitment. And Sophia, well, she has her work. Sophia nodded eagerly. I have 3 weddings and a corporate gala this month. It's my busiest season. I literally cannot take a single day off. I looked at their faces on the screen, 2 siblings I had once built forts with, now strategizing how to dump their share of our shared history onto my shoulders. They saw the house as a problem to be solved with maximum efficiency and minimum personal cost. They didn't see the mountain of our mother's unfinished knitting projects, our father's collection of dusty model airplanes, the report cards and finger paintings buried under decades of accumulated life. They saw junk. I saw a heartbreaking archaeological dig I was expected to perform alone. I have a job too, you know, I said, my voice quiet but firm. It may not be as high-powered as yours, but it's a full-time job. I can't just spend every spare moment for the next 6 months wading through trash. It won't take 6 months if you're efficient, Leo said dismissively. Just rent a dumpster. 2, maybe 3, toss everything. What could there possibly be to save? That was the core of our disagreement. For Leo and Sophia, the contents of the house were worthless obstacles on the path to a paycheck. For me, it felt like a final, sacred duty to our parents to sort through their lives with some measure of respect, to find the few items that held real sentimental value. How could I just throw everything into a dumpster without looking? It felt like throwing them away all over again. I'm not going to just blindly throw away Mom and Dad's things, I said. Fine, Leo sighed, his patience wearing thin. Then sort it, but you have to be the one to do it. We can't. We'll cover the cost of the dumpster rental and cleaning supplies. Consider that our contribution. My contribution is my physical labor, my time, my emotional energy. That seems fair to you? I asked, my heart pounding. It's the only logical solution, Leo stated, his tone final. We're voting on it. All in favor of Mila managing the cleanout, say aye. Aye, Leo said instantly. Aye, Sophia chirped, forcing a cheerful note into her voice. They both looked at me, waiting. My silence was my answer. Great, Leo said, ignoring my dissent. 2-1, it's settled. I'll have the keys couriered to you tomorrow. Keep us updated on the progress. Before I could protest further, he ended the Zoom call. Sophia sent a quick message in the chat. You're the best, sis. We owe you big time. Before her screen went blank too. I was left staring at my own reflection, the neat rows of books behind me a mocking reminder of the order that was about to be obliterated from my life. The burden wasn't just unfair, it was a deliberate act of abandonment. They had locked the door on their responsibility and mailed the key to me. The keys arrived the next day in a cold, impersonal courier envelope. There was no note, just the familiar brass keys on a worn leather fob. Holding them felt like accepting a sentence. That weekend, I decided to face the beast. I drove to my childhood home, a place I hadn't set foot in for over a year. The house, a modest 2-story colonial, looked sad from the outside. The paint was peeling, the lawn was overgrown with weeds, and a stack of yellowed newspapers sat on the porch, a monument to neglect. I put on a pair of heavy-duty gloves, a respirator mask, and braced myself. The moment I unlocked the door, the smell hit me, a musty, cloying combination of dust, decay, and something vaguely sour. It was the smell of stagnation. The entryway was barely passable. Stacks of magazines, junk mail, and shopping bags filled with unknown contents created a narrow canyon leading into the living room. Every surface was covered. The sofa, the chairs, the coffee table, all were buried under layers of stuff. It was so much worse than I had remembered. During our parents' final years, they must have done an incredible job of hiding the true extent of the problem from us, corralling the chaos into the rooms we never saw. I started with a single corner of the living room, a strategy I'd read about online for tackling overwhelming tasks. Break it down into small, manageable zones. My first zone was a tower of old National Geographic magazines dating back to the 1970s. As I bagged them for recycling, my phone buzzed. It was a new group chat notification from Sophia, titled Project House Cleanup. She had posted a picture of herself sipping a mimosa at a brunch spot. The caption read, "Cheering on our superstar at Mila from afar, you got this. So proud of all your hard work, family-first teamwork." I stared at the picture, my gloved hands covered in grime. The blatant hypocrisy was staggering. She wasn't cheering me on, she was building a narrative for her social media followers, one in which she was a supportive, loving sister. Leo responded to her post with a thumbs-up emoji. No words, just a simple, dismissive gesture. They weren't just absent, they were performing their absence, turning their dereliction of duty into a kind of boutique, long-distance support. I spent 8 hours that day just clearing a 5 by 5 foot space. My body ached, and I was emotionally exhausted. Every item I picked up felt loaded with meaning. A half-finished crossword puzzle in my dad's familiar scrawl, a receipt from a restaurant they loved, a cheap souvenir from a vacation they took 30 years ago. It was an endless stream of tiny, heartbreaking reminders. I filled 20 heavy-duty trash bags and hadn't even made a dent. The following week, I fell into a grim routine. I'd go to work, come home, change into my clean-up clothes, and drive to the house. I'd work for 3 or 4 hours until I was too tired or too emotionally drained to continue. I'd shower there in the one barely functional bathroom, trying to scrub the smell of dust and decay from my skin, then drive home and fall into a dreamless sleep. My own apartment, my sanctuary of order, started to feel like a temporary shelter I was only visiting. My siblings' support continued in its farcical way. Sophia would send motivational quotes she found online. "The secret to getting ahead is getting started," she'd text, as if I were merely procrastinating on a home organization project. Leo, on the other hand, was all business. He'd email me spreadsheets, asking for an inventory of any items of value I might find. He defined value in purely monetary terms: antique furniture, jewelry, silverware. He never once asked about family photos or heirlooms. He wanted a list of assets he could convert to cash. The true pact of selfishness became clear during a phone call a month into the process. I had hit a wall. I was in the kitchen, a room so horrifying it had been featured in my nightmares. Old food, sticky surfaces, and an army of dead insects. I was overwhelmed and on the verge of tears. I called Leo, hoping for a sliver of empathy. "I can't do this alone," I said, my voice trembling. "The kitchen is a genuine biohazard, Leo. I need help, even just for one weekend. If all 3 of us tackled it together, we could make some real progress." There was a long pause. "Mila, we've been over this," he said, his tone one of strained patience. "I can't. I have my kids' soccer tournament this weekend, and Sophia is flying to Napa for a client's bachelorette party. The timing just doesn't work." "The timing never works," I shot back, anger finally boiling over. "You don't get it. You haven't seen it. You haven't smelled it. You sit in your clean offices and your perfect houses and act like this is just some chore I need to check off a list. This is ruining my life. I have no time for friends, for hobbies, for myself. My entire existence has become about cleaning up a mess you're equally responsible for." "Let's not be dramatic," he said coolly. "We agreed to this arrangement. I'm holding up my end. I'm managing the estate. I paid for the dumpster you requested. I'm doing my part." "Your part?" I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You click a few buttons on a computer and make a few phone calls. I am literally wading through garbage. Do you think that's an equal distribution of labor?" "It's the most logical distribution," he insisted. "Look, if it's too much for you, then we'll have to hire the professionals, and you'll have to accept that your portion of the inheritance will be significantly smaller to cover the cost. Maybe that will provide some motivation." The threat hung in the air, cold and sharp. He was trying to frame my exhaustion as laziness, my desperation as a negotiating tactic. He was giving me an ultimatum. Either I continue to suffer in silence, or I would pay for my own relief. Sophia called me later that day, no doubt prompted by Leo. Her approach was different, but the goal was the same. "Hey, Mila," she began, her voice dripping with concern. "Leo told me you were feeling a little overwhelmed. I totally get it. It's a huge task, but you have to think about the big picture. Think about how amazing it will feel when it's all done. That house is our nest egg. Every dollar we save on cleanup is a dollar in our pockets. We're all in this together." "Are we, Sophia?" I asked quietly. Because from where I'm standing, knee-deep in moldy Tupperware, it feels like I'm in this alone. "Don't be like that," she chided gently. "We're a team. A remote team, just keep your eye on the prize. Once we sell the house, we can all take a nice vacation together to celebrate. My treat." It was another empty promise, another way to placate me and keep me working. Their selfishness wasn't just passive neglect, it was an active, coordinated scent. Rachie, they had formed a pact, agreeing to offload their responsibility, manage my descent, and keep their own hands clean, both literally and figuratively. They had decided that my well-being was a fair price to pay for their comfort and financial gain. That phone call was a turning point. It extinguished the last embers of hope I had for their support. I was on my own. And if I was on my own, then I would finish this on my own terms. 2 months bled into 3. The house became my world. I had developed a system: bagging, sorting, hauling. I had cleared most of the main floor, creating pathways through the clutter. The living room was now recognizable. The dining room table was visible for the first time in what I presumed was a decade. It was slow, grueling work, and I did it all in a haze of resentment and sorrow. My only comfort was Alina Vance, our old next-door neighbor. She would often see my car and come over with a thermos of hot tea or a sandwich, her kind eyes full of a sympathy my own siblings couldn't muster. "You're a good daughter, Mila," she'd say, watching me haul another bag to the dumpster. "Your parents would be so proud, and so ashamed of those other two." Alina had known our family for 40 years. She saw everything. She knew my parents weren't bad people, just overwhelmed. They had grown up in poverty, and for them, throwing anything away felt like a sin. Over the years, that instinct had mutated into a crippling illness. "They're just busy, Alina," I'd say, the excuse tasting like ash in my mouth. I don't know why I still defended them. Perhaps it was habit. She would just pat my arm. "There's a difference between busy and heartless, dear. Don't you ever forget that." The day I found it was a Saturday in late autumn. The air was crisp, and sunlight streamed weakly through the grimy windows. I was tackling my father's study, a room I had been dreading. Dad was a retired history teacher, and his love of books had spiraled into a form of hoarding. Books were everywhere, crammed onto shelves, piled in teetering stacks on the floor, spilling out of cardboard boxes. The room was a fire hazard and a testament to a brilliant mind slowly succumbing to chaos. My goal for the day was to clear the corner behind his desk. This area was particularly dense. Piles of old academic journals, binders full of lecture notes, and boxes of student papers from decades past formed a veritable fortress around his old leather armchair. As I started moving a heavy stack of historical quarterlies, I noticed that the floorboards beneath them were scuffed and scratched in a way that seemed unnatural. The surrounding boards were coated in a thick layer of dust, but these were marked with deep grooves, as if something heavy had been dragged across them repeatedly. Curiosity piqued, I cleared the entire area. It took over an hour. Beneath the final layer of books and papers, I found it, a small, loose floorboard. It wasn't obvious. The seams were tight, but the color was just slightly off. Using the edge of a ruler from my father's desk, I managed to pry it up. My heart began to pound. Movies and novels had conditioned me to expect a hidden treasure in a moment like this. But this was real life, and I expected to find nothing more than dust and dead spiders. Instead, my fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. It was a small, flat metal box, not much bigger than a paperback book. It wasn't locked. I lifted the lid, and my breath caught in my throat. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a single, old-fashioned safe deposit box key. It was attached to a simple metal tag, engraved with the name of a downtown bank and a number, 417. Beneath the key was a folded piece of paper. It was a letter, written in my father's distinctive, elegant cursive. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. The letter was addressed to the one who cares. It read, "My dearest child, if you are reading this, it means you have done what I could not bring myself to do. You have waded into the chaos of our lives and tried to bring order to it. You have looked past the mess and seen the people we were. For that, your mother and I are eternally grateful and eternally sorry for the burden we left behind. We know what people think, we know what this house looks like. This illness, it crept up on us. It started with not wanting to waste, and it ended with us being prisoners in our own home. We were ashamed. Too ashamed to ask for help, even from our own children. We saw the judgment in Leo's eyes, the disgust in Sophia's. They see our things as junk, our home as a teardown. They see the mess, but they do not see us. But you, my dear, I always knew you were different. You have your mother's patience and my love of history. You understand that things have stories. You value memory over money. This key opens a safe deposit box at the Merchants Bank downtown. Inside is everything your mother and I managed to save. Over our lifetimes, it is not a king's ransom, but it is substantial. We sold off a small piece of land my father left me years ago and invested it wisely. We never touched it. We always intended to divide it among the three of you. But in these last few years, watching how our children grew, we had a change of heart. An inheritance is not just about money, it is a final statement of a parent's values. It should be a reward for character, not a simple biological birthright. Therefore, we have left a single, legally binding directive with our lawyer to be enacted upon our death. The entire contents of this box are to be given only to the child who personally oversees and completes the cleaning of our home, not the one who hires it out, not the one who manages it from afar, the one who puts their own hands to the task, the one who shows this house, and our memory, the respect it deserves by saving it from ruin. This is not a punishment for your siblings. It is a reward for you. It is for the one who stayed, the one who sorted, the one who remembered. You have earned this not just by cleaning our house, but by proving you understood our hearts. With all our loves. Dad. I read the letter 3 times, the words blurring through my tears. It was a mixture of grief, vindication, and a profound, bone-deep love. They had seen me. My parents, even in their final, clouded years, had seen me clearly. They knew who I was, and they knew who my siblings were. This wasn't a trap or a test they had set. It was a consequence, a natural result of our own actions. Leo's obsession with monetary value and Sophia's obsession with appearances had blinded them. They saw the house as a dirty job to be avoided. I saw it as a final act of love, and my parents had recognized that. The weight of the key in my palm felt immense. It was more than just access to a bank vault. It was a validation of every exhausting, thankless hour I had spent in that house. It was a final gift from a father who understood the difference between price and value. The secret wasn't just money hidden under the floorboards. The secret was that my parents had known all along. They had known who would be willing to do the hard work, and they had made sure that hard work would be rewarded. A quiet sense of resolve settled over me. I would finish this job, and then I would follow my father's instructions to the letter. The discovery of the key and the letter changed the nature of my work. It was no longer a grim, resentful chore. It became a mission. Every bag of trash I hauled out, every surface I scrubbed, felt like a step toward honoring my parents' final wish. The exhaustion was still there, but it was now laced with a sense of purpose. I was no longer just cleaning a house. I was earning my inheritance, not just of money, but of trust and recognition. My first step was to contact my parents, lawyer Mr. Albright, a kind, elderly man who had handled their affairs for decades. I made an appointment without telling my siblings. I needed to understand the legal framework of my father's letter before I did anything else. Sitting in his quiet, wood-paneled office, I felt a nervous energy I hadn't felt in years. I handed him the letter. He read it slowly, his expression unchanging. When he finished, he looked at me over his spectacles. I was wondering when one of you would find this, he said with a soft smile. Your father was a very thoughtful man, Mila. He and your mother came to see me about 2 years ago. They were very clear about their intentions. He pulled a thick file from his cabinet. It's all here, he explained, tapping the file. A legally executed codicil to their will. It is an addendum that overrides any previous instructions regarding the contents of Safe Deposit Box 417. It states, in no uncertain terms, that the beneficiary of said box is to be determined by the fulfillment of a specific condition. He read the legal jargon aloud, but the meaning was identical to my father's letter. The contents were to be transferred in their entirety to the heir, who personally undertook and completed the clearance of the family home. The executor of the estate, Leo, was legally obligated to sign the transfer papers upon receiving proof that the condition had been met. And what constitutes proof? I asked, my heart hammering. Your father thought of that as well, Mr. Albright said. He stipulated that the sworn testimony of a non-family member, a neighbor, or a community member of long standing would be sufficient. He also included a provision that if one child performed the work, they were under no obligation to inform the others of this codicil until after the house was officially listed for sale. A slow smile spread across my face. My father hadn't just left me a reward, he had left me a shield. He had given me the legal authority to proceed in silence, protecting me from the inevitable drama and manipulation that would ensue if Leo and Soph found out. Eleanor Vance, our next-door neighbor, has seen me there nearly every day, I said. She would be willing to provide a statement. Excellent, Mr. Albright nodded. Then all you need to do, Mila, is finish the job. Get the house completely empty and professionally cleaned. Get Mrs. Vance to sign an affidavit, which I can prepare. Once that's done, we inform your brother, the executor, that a condition of the will has been met and his signature is required for the asset transfer. He won't know the details of what he's signing away until it's legally binding. I left the lawyer's office feeling 10 feet tall. The plan was clear, it was legal, and it was exactly what my parents had wanted. The secret knowledge was a warm glow inside me. It powered me through the next 6 weeks of relentless work. I hired a larger dumpster and worked with a renewed, almost manic energy. The study, once a fortress of paper, was emptied. The bedrooms, filled with old clothes and forgotten treasures, were sorted and cleared. I designated 3 areas in the garage: donation, keepsake, and trash. For the keepsake pile, I saved the things I knew my parents cherished. My mother's recipe box, my father's favorite reading glasses, a handful of family albums filled with faded photographs of the 3 of us as happy children, blissfully unaware of the complications to come. I even saved a few items for Leo and Sophia, our father's collection of vintage cufflinks for him, our mother's favorite pearl necklace for her. I was not them. I would not let this inheritance, however it was divided, erase our shared history entirely. Throughout this time, the group chat remained a source of morbid entertainment. Sophia posted pictures from her Napa trip, complete with wine tasting and spa days. Thinking of you, Mila. Hope the cleanup is going well. Work hard, play hard. Leo, meanwhile, was getting impatient. Mila, I need a progress report. The realtor wants to schedule a walkthrough. When do you project completion? I kept my responses brief and noncommittal. Making good progress. Still a lot to do. We'll let you know when it's ready. I didn't send pictures. I didn't share details. My silence seemed to irritate them, but they had no grounds to complain. I was doing the work they refused to do. They had forfeited their right to supervise. One evening, Eleanor came over as I was sweeping the last of the dust out of the master bedroom. The room was completely empty, echoing, and clean. The floors were bare wood, waiting to be refinished. The setting sun cast long shadows through the clean windows. "My goodness, child," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've worked a miracle. You've let the light back into this house." "I had good motivation," I replied, leaning on my broom. I told her everything. About the key, the letter, the lawyer. I showed her my father's words. She read the letter, her hand covering her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes. Robert was a good man, she whispered. A clever man, he always knew who had the truest heart. She looked at me, her eyes fierce with loyalty. You just tell me what you need me to sign. It will be my absolute honor to see that his wishes are carried out. With Alina's support solidified, the final pieces of the plan clicked into place. My father's final words were not just an explanation, they were a blueprint. He had trusted me to execute his plan, to see it through to the end. I felt a profound connection to him, a sense of continuing a conversation that had been interrupted by death. He had laid out the path, and I was walking it, step by dusty, determined step. The house was almost empty, but my purpose had never been so full. The confrontation with my siblings was looming, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. I had my father's words and the full weight of the law on my side. With the house finally empty, the next phase began. It wasn't enough to just clear out the clutter. I had to erase the years of neglect. I used some of my own savings to hire a professional cleaning crew for a deep, top-to-bottom scrub. They spent 2 days sanitizing the kitchen and bathrooms, cleaning the windows, and washing the walls. The stale, musty smell of hoarding was replaced by the clean, anonymous scent of bleach and lemon polish. Next, I hired a floor specialist to refinish the original hardwood floors that had been hidden under piles of junk for decades. When they were done, the wood gleamed with a warm, golden light. The house was transformed. It was no longer a tomb of sad memories, but a bright, airy space filled with potential. Standing in the empty living room, sunlight pouring in, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. I had saved it. During this time, I carefully documented everything. I kept receipts for the cleaning service, the floor refinishing, and the dumpster rentals. I took after photos of every room, a stark contrast to the before pie. Sea tours I had taken on that first, dreadful day. This wasn't just for my own satisfaction, it was evidence. My next visit was to Mr. Albright. I brought the folder of receipts and photos, along with Alina, who was dressed in her Sunday best for the occasion. She signed the affidavit he had prepared, a sworn statement detailing her first-hand observation of my solitary work over the past 4.5 months. She described seeing my car at the house every evening and on weekends, watching me fill dumpster after dumpster, and confirmed that she had never once seen Leo or Sophia on the property. Her signature was firm and clear. Mr. Albright reviewed all the documents. He nodded, a satisfied look on his face. This is perfect, Mila. The condition has been met beyond any reasonable doubt. The next step is to execute the transfer of assets from the box. He explained the process. As the estate's executor, Leo had to sign the bank's release form. The form itself wouldn't specify the contents or value. It would simply be a directive to release the contents of Box 417 to the beneficiary stipulated in the will's codicil, me. We will present this to him as a routine part of closing the estate, Mr. Albright advised. We'll bundle it with other paperwork. He'll see it as just another box to tick. It's better that way. The final piece was the bank. I called and made an appointment, my voice steady despite the frantic beating of my heart. I took a day off from the library, a day that felt more significant than any vacation. At the bank, a quiet, serious woman named Ms. Davis led me down to the vault. The air grew cool and still as we passed through the massive, gleaming steel door. It felt like entering a sacred space. She located Box 417 and, using her key and mine, opened the lock. She slid out the long, metal box and placed it on a table in a small, private viewing room. She gave me a polite nod and closed the door behind her, leaving me alone. For a moment, I just stared at the box. This was it, the culmination of everything. My hands were shaking as I lifted the lid. I wasn't sure what to expect. Old coins, a few pieces of jewelry. I was not prepared for what I saw. The box was filled with neat stacks of stock certificates for blue-chip companies, bundles of treasury bonds, and several official-looking account statements from a high-yield investment fund. At the very bottom were several canvas bags containing gold coins. I spent the next hour carefully going through everything. My father, the humble history teacher, had been a remarkably shrewd and patient investor. He had taken the money from that long-ago land sale and nurtured it, letting it grow silently over decades. I found a recent statement from the investment fund that listed the current market value. As I read the number, the air left my lungs. It was not a king's ransom, as my father had written, but it was a life-changing amount of money. It was enough to buy a house, to travel, to live without financial anxiety for a very long time. It was more than the estimated value of my parents' house, probably 2 or 3 times over. Tears streamed down my face. They were tears of shock, of gratitude, of grief for the parents I wished I had known better. This wasn't just money. It was a legacy of quiet diligence, of foresight, of love. It was my father's final lesson. True wealth isn't loud and flashy. It's built slowly, thoughtfully, and purposefully. I carefully placed everything back in the box, except for one of the investment statements. I closed the lid, took a deep breath, and walked out of the viewing room. I asked Ms. Davis about the process of liquidating the assets and transferring them into a new account in my name. She explained that all it required was the signed release form from the estate's executor. That evening, Mr. Albright's office overnighted a package of documents to Leo. It contained tax forms, realtor agreements, and, buried in the middle, the safe deposit box asset release form. The description was deliberately vague. To authorize the release of contents from Box 417 to the designated beneficiary as per the codicil of the final will and testament. 2 days later, the signed paperwork came back. Leo hadn't even called to ask what was in the box. To him, it was just another piece of administrative minutiae, an annoying task to complete before he could get his hands on the real prize: the house. He had no idea what he had just signed away. He had, with a simple flick of his pen, legally relinquished any claim to a fortune far greater than the one he was so eagerly pursuing. I made my claim quietly, without fanfare. I took the signed form back to the bank. The assets were transferred into an account under my name. The gold coins were appraised and secured. It was all mine. The silence of the transaction was its greatest power. While Leo and Sophia were busy planning how they would spend their share of the house money, I was quietly securing a future they couldn't even imagine. The house was no longer the prize. It was the decoy, and they had fallen for it completely. With the funds from the safe deposit box secured in my name, the final act of the drama could begin. I called Leo. "The house is ready," I said, my voice calm and professional. "It's completely empty, cleaned, and the floors are refinished. You can have your realtor do the walkthrough whenever you'd like." There was a surprised silence on the other end. "Wow," he said, genuinely impressed. "Already? That was faster than I expected. You really buckled down. Good work, Mila." It was the first compliment he'd given me in years, and it was utterly meaningless. "I'll have the realtor, a guy named Steven, call you to arrange a time. He'll want to take photos for the listing." The walkthrough was scheduled for the following Saturday. I insisted we all be there, myself, Leo, and Sophia. "I think we should see it together for the first time as a family," I said, laying the trap with a sweet, innocent tone. Sophia loved the idea, seeing it as a wonderfully symbolic moment. Leo just grunted his assent, likely wanting to be there to talk numbers with the realtor in person. I arrived first on Saturday morning. The house was gleaming. It looked beautiful and serene, a place of peace rather than chaos. I walked through the empty rooms one last time, my footsteps echoing on the polished floors. This house had been my prison for months, but now it was my stage. Leo and Sophia arrived together, a united front. They walked in and their jaws dropped. Sophia let out a little gasp. "Oh my God, Mila," she breathed, her eyes wide. "I can't believe this is the same house. It's incredible. You're a miracle worker." Leo was more practical, but equally impressed. He ran his hand along a dust-free windowsill and tapped his foot on the solid, gleaming floorboards. "The place has good bones," he said, a note of excitement in his voice. "It's going to show beautifully. Steven is going to be thrilled. We'll get top dollar for this, no question." They moved from room to room, praising my work, their words a meaningless stream of belated gratitude. They were like generals arriving after the battle, complimenting the lone surviving soldier on how well they had held the line. They pointed out what they would do with their share of the money. Sophia was planning a trip to Italy. Leo was looking at a new boat. They spoke as if the money was already in their accounts. The realtor, Stephen, arrived shortly after. He was a slick, polished man in an expensive suit. He was even more enthusiastic than my siblings. "Fantastic," he boomed, walking through the rooms. "Just fantastic. The transformation is remarkable. With the market as it is, and in this condition, we can list this aggressively. I'm confident we'll have multiple offers within the week." He sat down with the three of us at the dining room table, a table I had single-handedly excavated and refinished. He laid out his proposed listing price and his commission structure. Leo and Sophia were giddy, their eyes sparkling with dollar signs. The number was even higher than they had hoped. "So," Leo said, turning to me, a magnanimous smile on his face, "we need to discuss the division of the proceeds. Obviously, it will be split 3 ways, as per the will, but Sophia and I have discussed it, and we think it's only fair that you get a little extra for your efforts." Sophia nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. We were thinking an extra $5,000 for you, off the top, as a thank you bonus for all your hard work." $5,000, a pittance. An insult dressed up as a generous gesture. It was my cue. I took a slow breath and placed a folder on the table. "Actually," I said, my voice perfectly level, "we need to talk about the will." Leo frowned. "What about the will? It's straightforward. Everything is to be divided equally among the 3 of us." "That's true for the house," I said, opening the folder, "but not for all of the estate's assets." I slid a copy of my father's letter across the table to him. He picked it up, a confused look on his face. Sophia leaned over to read it with him. I watched their faces as they read. I saw the initial confusion shift to disbelief, then to dawning horror, and finally to pure, unadulterated fury. Leo's face turned a blotchy red. He looked up from the letter, his eyes blazing. "What is this? This is ridiculous. It's a note. It's not a legal document." "Oh, but it is," I said calmly, pushing another document across the table. "This is the legally executed codicil to the will filed by Dad 2 years ago. Mr. Albright has the original, of course. It outlines the exact same condition. And this," I added, sliding a third document over, "is the sworn affidavit from Alina Vance, testifying that I, and I alone, fulfilled the condition." Sophia's mouth opened and closed like a fly. A safe deposit box. What was in the safe deposit box?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Leo was already shaking his head, a sick smile on his face. "It doesn't matter. It's probably just some old sentimental junk. Dad didn't have any real money." I let the silence hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final blow. I took out the investment statement I had saved from the box and placed it on the table. "He had this," I said quietly. Leo snatched it up. His eyes scanned the page, then widened in shock. He read the final balance at the bottom of the page, and all the color drained from his face. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. "No," he whispered. "No, that's impossible." Sophia grabbed the paper from his hand. She let out a choked sob. "This can't be real." "It's very real," I said. "And it's all legally mine. In fact, Leo, you signed the transfer release form yourself last week. You were so eager to get the house on the market, you didn't even bother to ask what you were signing away." The realization hit him like a physical blow. He slumped in his chair, staring at me with a look of utter hatred. You deceived us. You schemed behind our backs." "No," I said, my voice rising with the force of 4 months of repressed anger. "I did the work. I spent almost 5 months of my life in this house, dealing with a mess you refused to even look at. I sacrificed my nights, my weekends, my mental health. You two sat back and sent emojis and empty platitudes from your comfortable lives. You abandoned your responsibility. You left me to do it all alone. Dad knew you would. He and Mom knew exactly who you were. This wasn't my scheme. It was their consequence." Sophia started to cry, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks. But we're family, you're supposed to share. Was it family when you voted to dump this entire nightmare on me? I shot back. Was it family when you told me to just throw away all of Mom and Dad's possessions? Was it family when you offered me a $5,000 bonus for a job that nearly broke me? You don't get to invoke the word family only when it benefits you. The realtor, Stephen, was looking back and forth between us, his professional smile frozen on his face, clearly wishing the floor would swallow him whole. As for the house, I continued, my voice now cold as ice. You're right, the proceeds are to be split 3 ways. But first, I'll be reimbursed from the estate for all my expenses. The cleaners, the floor refinishing, the dumpsters, and I will also be billing the estate for my labor. 480 hours at a professional organizer's rate of $75 an hour. That comes to $36,000. Leo's head snapped up. You can't do that. I can, and I have, I said, gesturing to the folder. It's all documented. Mr. Albright has already approved it. That will come off the top before the 3-way split. Just like your thank you bonus, but a little more reflective of the actual work involved. The reckoning was complete. They were left speechless, their greed and arrogance turning to ash in their mouths. They had lost the real inheritance, and now their share of the smaller one was shrinking before their eyes. They hadn't just lost money. They had lost the moral high ground, their self-conception as the successful, important siblings. They had been outmaneuvered by the quiet, overlooked librarian. And the best part was, they had no one to blame but themselves. The sale of the house was a tense and miserable affair. Leo and Sophia barely spoke to me, communicating only through terse emails or through Mr. Albright. They tried to contest my claim for labor costs, but Mr. Albright shut them down immediately, reminding Leo that as executor, he had a fiduciary duty to settle all legitimate claims against the estate, and mine was ironclad. They were forced to accept it. The house sold quickly, just as Stephen the realtor had predicted. We got slightly over the asking price after a small bidding war. The closing was done remotely. The money from the sale was wired to the estate account, my expenses and labor fees were paid out to me, and the remaining amount was divided into 3 equal shares. My portion was a nice little bonus. For them, after seeing the statement from the safe deposit box, it felt like pocket change. I knew this because Sophia couldn't resist sending one last, venomous text message. I hope you're happy with your blood money. Mom and Dad would be ashamed of your greed. I didn't reply. What was the point? She would never understand that the money was secondary. The real prize was the validation, the acknowledgement from my parents that they saw me, that they valued character over charm, substance over style. In the months that followed, I made some changes. I didn't quit my job at the library. I loved it too much. But I did use a portion of the inheritance to buy the bookstore my apart. Ment was located above. The owner was retiring and was thrilled to sell to someone who loved books as much as he did. I became a small business owner, a curator of stories in a new way. I also bought a small, sensible house on the other side of town with a garden and a porch swing. It was a home I had earned, a place of peace that was entirely my own. I kept the keepsakes I had saved from my parents' house. I displayed my mother's recipe box in my new kitchen. I put my father's reading glasses on the desk in my study, and I had the best of the family photos restored and framed. They were pictures of a happier time, and looking at them, I chose to remember the love, not the illness that had clouded their final years. As a final act of grace, I mailed the cufflinks to Leo and the pearl necklace to Sophia. I included a simple, unsigned note with each, "Thought you should have this." I never received a thank you. I didn't expect one. My relationship with my siblings is, for all intents and purposes, over. We don't speak at holidays. We don't exchange birthday cards. Their selfishness and my refusal to accept it created a chasm that was too wide to cross. Sometimes, I feel a pang of sadness for the family we could have been. But then I remember the coldness in Leo's voice and the casual cruelty in Sophia's social media posts, and the sadness fades, replaced by a quiet certainty that I am better off without them. Eleanor Vance and I have become very close. She comes over for tea in my new garden, and we talk for hours. She is the grandmother I never really had, a link to my parents that is untainted by the drama. She often tells me how proud my father would be. He didn't just leave you money, Mila, she told me one afternoon. He left you a story to tell, a story about how decency and hard work win in the end. She was right. The safe deposit box held my financial inheritance, but the house held the real one. In cleaning it, I inherited my parents' true legacy. It was an inheritance of character. I learned about my own strength, my own resilience. I learned to stand up for myself against the people who were supposed to love me the most.